Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And inshallah, we're gonna start. Thank you all for waiting so patiently. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So, inshallah, today we will go through the allegorical commentary for the last part of Surah Al-Buruj, and we're going to start the first half of Surah at-Tariq. But before we do that, if we want to take a look at the assignment for this week or for the last few weeks. Wow, subhanAllah. So the two assignments was to make as much dua as we can, even for the mundane things, and to forgive others the way we want to be forgiven. So how can I ask, how did that go for you all? I'm gonna sit back a little bit just because for the microphone. How was this assignment? So I'll share something interesting. Today, it's Tuesday, and inshallah, Thursday night is going to be the expected time for the night of the 15th of Sha'ban. And there's a narration that the Prophet Muhammad SAW shared that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this night, he forgives the sins of, all the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this night, and he forgives the sins of every believer, except for the one who has enmity in his heart towards others, like hiqd, right? And so we did the Majlis Children's program last Sunday, and normally we have an icebreaker that's related to the art project, that's related to the lesson. And this time, when we were working with the children, we were preparing them for the night of the 15th. And so the icebreaker, the actual icebreaker for the children was anonymously share a story, look into their heart, and see if there's someone they're mad at. And every single child had someone they were mad at, except for I think two. And that was because they had just resolved it before coming. So, um, and the interesting thing, subhanAllah, for these kids. And so then it was like, we're going to do something. It doesn't mean just because you do it, you always feel it. But can you make a dua for the person that you're mad at and say, oh Allah, please guide them and please forgive them, right? And then let me know how you feel. So as far as the children went, it was really cute. There was like a 6-year-old or 7-year-old who was with us, and she was like, but how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we forgive them? And like the reason why they were upset is because there's like a bully in their class that's like, especially for some of the kids who are in public schools and were interested getting Our apologies, we're having some technical issues. So we're just telling the story of these children. Maybe we'll stop telling the story of these children. But essentially they made the dua. They said even though they don't feel like it, they're gonna just say the dua. Oh Allah, please guide them and please forgive them. Because they're sweet little kids, they actually like you could see them putting their heart into it. They don't just say words, they actually like try to mean the words they say. And so then afterwards we talked about how did you feel after you did that? And all of them said it made them feel a lot better and it made them not care as much about what happened. And essentially that they realized that that was better for them. It wasn't even about the other person. They themselves felt relieved and alleviated by that practice. So so this it's not in although it sounds easy, forgive others the way you want to be forgiven. Um, you know, if you can find what's in the heart, then it can be addressed. But many times, the people that we're mad at, we don't even know that we're mad at them, you know, and unless it like appears in some way. So, just wanted to ask how did that go for everyone? Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm, yeah. And so that was one of the things that I even, in terms of talking to the kids, is I told them, "Are you guys still mad at what they did?" And they said yes. you know, but I'm like, but you made dua for their guidance and their forgiveness. So like both of those things can exist together, like we're not supposed to like getting bullied. It's not like we're like, oh, that was okay. No, it was wrong. It's upsetting. And I think it was Imam Shafi'i who said the one who doesn't get angry for things that like are supposed to make you angry is a himar. So it's supposed to an injustice is supposed to rile something in us, so that's okay. And so I think that for the children, what we, and even like it's kind of like these spiritual practices, they're so simple that children can get it, but they're also deep so that adults are doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing in our old age that we were doing um, when we were kids. Is just the repetition. Is actually sometimes we think we've forgiven someone and we're like, okay, there's nothing there. And then a scenario happens, you might hear their name, and it's like, is there still something there? So what do you do? What do we do in those moments where you thought it was done? You thought, oh, halas, I'm over this, and may Allah bless them, and I'm good, and everything. And then all of a sudden, something happens, and you're like, there's something in me responding to just their name being mentioned. Do it all over again. Yeah, you just can. It's a practice. Essentially, it's a spiritual practice. And as Imam Zaid has often said, like we try to do the best that we can, but there's no such thing as like assuming we're fully done with anything. Does that make sense? Like even purifying the intention, we do the best we can, then we make dua, and then you're renewing it. So forgiveness is very similar sometimes, depending on the level of the harm. Is that it often needs to be renewed, like the forgiveness, the practice to forgive the same person for the same thing. Um, if we notice something, we you just continue to do it until it just no longer presents itself that way. Yeah. 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 Mhm. 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 Mm. Hmm. Yeah. MashaAllah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Subhanallah. Mhm. That's amazing. Well, I was gonna say you're teaching us, alhamdulillah. So I feel like when I said the homework assignment, I'm a little bit intimidated myself because I always feel like the week tests you and your intention, you know? So alhamdulillah. So when you guys do it and I hear the stories of your experiences, I learn so much from your journeys. So mm, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, that's amazing. That's really beautiful. And alhamdulillah, may Allah keep you healthy and strong and full shifa, inshallah. But what you said about how, um, about these du'as that people made in very private and sort of unwitnessed like circumstances that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated their words so that all we would know them for the rest of mankind. Like how many centuries ago was the dua of Yunus alayhi salam in the whale? In such an unseen place in the pits of the ocean, you know what I mean? And but like we all know this dot now. Like we're separated by centuries and time, and like the world has changed. But this like prayers, this universal principle of Toba and how to turn to Him and humility. It's like Allah magnified this hidden thing for all of us to like to be guided from. Mm. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. That's amazing. And this reflection is really connected to, very much connected to both the allegorical commentary of the verses we took from Surah al-Buruj and the verses we're going to take this week from Surah al-Tariq. So this particular point about like the hidden nature of like the world of your heart and what it's going through and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala witnesses and values this, puts a value on it so much. So I think that's a because it's such a good, powerful segue into the tafsir. I will not take other reflections if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay, alhamdulillah. So I'm going to pull up the verses from last time. This is Here's a contribution dua, and remembering Allah is easy. Forgiveness for a few. Okay, not there yet, but not angry. Well, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And that's why I think like sometimes the idea of it being a practice, like we told the kids, just say it, even if you don't feel it. And then sometimes the action of saying it brings the feeling into your heart. So just, you know, and and then it comes from the heart. And I am gonna share my screen. Okay, everyone can see Surah Al-Buruj. The allegorical commentary is going to be related to the last portion from verses 11 to 21. So I'm going to read the English translation first. Surely those who believe and do good will have gardens under which rivers flow. That is the greatest triumph. Indeed, the crushing grip of your Lord is severe, for he is certainly the one who originates and resurrects all. And he is the all forgiving, all loving, Lord of the throne, the all glorious, doer of whatever he wills. Has the story of the destroyed forces reached you, O Prophet, the forces of Pharaoh and Thamud? Yet the disbelievers still persist in denial, but Allah encompasses them from all sides. In fact, this is a glorious Qur'an recorded in a preserved tablet. So Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says about the first verse or the 11th verse. The people who truly and completely believe and do good deeds, and he says, with the hands of their hearts and their spirits and their soul. These are inward good deeds. He literally calls them baltani. And they have the gardens of knowing God. And subhanAllah, you gave many examples, but there are many examples of the inward good deeds, forgiving others, making secret dua for people, giving charity in such a way that the person receiving it doesn't know that it's coming from you, um, making lots of good intentions for the same acts. Like there's no one who witnesses really these things except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The quiet dhikr that a person makes in their home, dua, Qur'an, any devotional acts that are really not witnessed physically by others, um, they are inward acts. And there's many acts that are actually just when he says AD qulub, it's like your heart has hands. And your heart is doing things, right? Like good things. And so it has these amad. And so he says the person who does this, and again, for those who might be new, the allegorical commentary is not tafsir. It is a metaphor taken for us, like lessons and metaphors taken from the verses that we can apply to our lives, but it's not the same thing as tafsir. Okay, just so everyone knows. And it's called ishara, like what it directs to. So these are all kinds of the hidden good deeds. And he says, what these people receive are the rivers of spiritual knowledge and wisdom, and they're given to such people. And this is the supreme triumph and the greatest happiness. And so, subhanAllah, this is, I think, a really beautiful sort of thing to reflect on as we are approaching the night of the 15th of Sha'ban, and after that, inshallah, the month of Ramadan. And then he says, people who scoff at religion, right? Um, there's a crushing grip for them. There are people who are scoff at religion. They scoff at devotion. Like they make fun of people who are wanting to pray and wanting to turn to God. For them, what they are gripped with is that they're veiled from like the sweetness of what these other people are experiencing. And also if they're actually harming them, then he says su'ul hisab, like a bad reckoning. And Allah brings into existence, it says, so he is the one who originates. And he says he brings into existence or he originates the veil of the veiled, but he also returns people to spiritual witnessing. And that is for the arifin. And he is forgiving, and he is forgiving to the people of repentance. And he is loving to those seeking proximity to him out of love. I thought that was really beautiful. That he is al-wadud to the one who is like approaching him out of their love for him. So there's many ways to approach Allah, but to approach him out of love is a way to actually experience his beautiful name, al-wadud. And then about the glorious throne, Dhul Arsh al-Majid. Here he says, and actually he quotes Imam al-Qushayri, and he says, a symbol for the throne, for the Arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can be the heart of the knower. Just like the statement, there's a statement, he says, the heart of the Arif is like the Arsh of Allah. The heart of the Arif is like the Arsh of Allah. So we know that لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله, right? So how had this Quran been revealed to a mountain, it would have just been crushed out of like it's in out of the awe and humility in front of Allah. Like the mountain could not, you could say, handle the revelation of God, the wahi, but the heart of the believer can handle the wahi, right? The and it and it first lands on the very first heart that it lands on is the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and you can read about how when the wahi came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how in the different ways that the wahi came to him, that it was a heavy and momentous thing. Wahi means revelation. So when the revelation of the Quran comes to him, it's a heavy, momentous thing. So the heart of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, who first receives it, and then it's disseminated into the hearts of all mankind, right? So that's a big deal. That means the human heart was given a very, very, very special capacity that even mountains don't have. So here he says there's a symbol of the arsh, um, can be the heart of the arif. And he says, even when it says the verse in the Quran, actually this is that he says, he quotes, the heart of the arif is like the arsh of Allah. What that reminded me of was the verse in the Quran that says, Ar-Rahman ala al-arsh istawa, right? And this is a verse that causes, if you take the theology class with Shaykh Fuad, causes a lot of discussion and debate in theology. But here we're not looking at like exact theology of literal meaning. We're looking at symbolic metaphor. And symbolic metaphor is um, that like to know God, right, is something that the heart of the believer becomes prepared for. That's kind of like the metaphor, yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. فعال لما يريد. Doer of whatever he wills. This is such an incredible. When I was a kid learning this surah, I remember this verse so well. فعال لما يريد. The one who does whatever he wants, because there is no one who can do whatever they want, right? Like, you can, but every human being has consequences, right? There's no one who can just do whatever they want without consequences. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does whatever he wills. And in the allegorical commentary, one of the things that Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions is he says he can make the close distant and he can make the distant close if he wills. And Imam al-Qushayri, he says that if he wants to make the best of souls become the worst of nufus, he can. And if he wants to do the opposite, he can. Uh, and this is significant. It reminded me of a story we've said at the Majlis. I know my husband has shared the story many a time, so forgive me for repeating it. But there's a story of when Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani was walking with his students in Iraq, in Baghdad, and they passed by a drunkard in the street. And as they passed by the drunkard in the street, the drunkard actually addresses Sheikh Abdul Qadir and he says, he doesn't call him Sheikh, he says, Ya Abdul Qadir. Um, he says, Ya Abdul Qadir, Allahu Qadir am ghayru Qadir? Is Allah Qadir? Is Allah able or he's not able? And Sheikh Abdul Qadir, he says, Qadir. And then the drunk man repeats the question again, Ya Abdul Qadir, Allahu Qadir am ghayru Qadir? And he says, Qadir. Says a third time, Ya Abdul Qadir, Allahu Qadir am ghayru Qadir? And he says, this time, he says Qadir and he starts to weep. Sheikh Abdul Qadir starts weeping and the students are shocked to see him in that state, kind of like breaks down crying. And then the students ask him about it afterwards. Um, he tells the students, please take the drunk man to and clean him up and give him clothing and take care of him and treat him well. So the students now want to know what happened, what was this conversation about? And so the drunk man looks at Sheikh Abdul Qadir and he says, the first time he's asking is, Ya Abdul Qadir, is Allah able or not able to take me from my state, dirty and filthy and drunk in the streets, and make me clean and pure and repentant to him, like okay again, right? And so he's saying, yes, Allah is able. Second time he says, Ya Abdul Qadir, is Allah able to take me from my state now and make me like you all, right? And essentially make me like you, like make me a great wali, right? And so he says, Qadir. And then he's able, Allah is able. And then he says the third time, and is Allah able to take you and make you like me, right? And he says that's when Sheikh Abdul Qadir, he says, yes, he's able to, and he breaks down crying. And what's interesting about this story is that the identity of the man is hidden. and he is brought and taken care of, and he's cleaned up, and he's repented, and he actually this thing that plays out between in front of the students, he does become one of the um, sort of like great people in his time. So subhanAllah, this idea of fa'alun lima yurid, I think is really, really powerful because it's not just like anything in the world. When we were in, alhamdulillah, when we were in Colombia, one of the things that I think was really beautiful that Sheikh Muhammad kept saying is take the word impossible, the word impossible is a veil. Take it and throw it behind yourselves. Like just throw it out of the way. Stop thinking impossible. Stop, because it's a veil to actually what is possible, and that truly Allah is capable of all things, right? So that word impossible, he said, take it and throw it away, throw it behind your back, subhanAllah. And so in this regard, Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, because of this, for this reason, the knower of God is always, he says, he always turns to God with ittirar, like the one who's fleeing to God. He's never like satisfied, like I'm good, I don't need to do anything. In his heart, he has this like uh that continuous feeling of I need you. Like I'm in total and absolute need of you. And this is also one of the sort of like secrets to why du'as are answered, is because whenever someone calls upon God in a state of it, in their muttar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers their prayers. So the person who seems to be so like the person who has this proximity to Allah, they make their prayers like that. Their prayers are muttar. Like they don't feel for a moment that they don't need Allah. Everything is very. I mean, they don't. It's very different than the person who's self-righteous, and the person who assumes, look at all my good deeds and look at what I'm doing and look at what I've memorized, and they're just consumed with their self, right? And so they think their dua might be answered because they think it's transactional. Like, here's my good deeds on this side, here's my prayer, so Allah's going to answer my prayers because I've done all of this. Versus the one who's not looking at their deeds at all, what they've done right or wrong. I mean, for the wrong, obviously tawbah, but they're just in total need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah is fa'alun lima yurid. And then he says that they're impoverished with Allah, and when it comes to the decisions in their life, they are never with anyone other than Allah. Like they're never at rest or at peace, or when it comes to what they need to do, it's like the one they're with is God and no one else. هل أتاك حديث الجنود? Has the story of the destroyed forces reached you, O Prophet? So the soldiers, he says, of the nafs, here is the soldiers of the lower self. He says they wage a war against a person's spirit to cause them to succumb to their basest desires. And he says Pharaoh represents the lowest desires, and Thamud represents love of this world that causes blindness. And he says such people, they don't distinguish between different spiritual states, what their soul, their ego, what their ego tells them. They don't distinguish when they're close to God or when they're not close to God. Um, they don't distinguish between when they feel proximity to Him or when they feel distant. And Allah encompasses them from all sides and knows that nothing is lost on Him from the things that are lost on them. Right? They don't make these distinguishing things, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it all in the fine details that they are negligent of. And then he says, بَلْ هُوَ قُرْآنٌ مَجِيدٌ. And he says, this Qur'an, it reaches and it touches the arwah, the spirits within people. And the preserved tablet, recorded in a preserved tablet, is, he says, this is a symbol for, it's preserved essentially from the hearts of the knowers of God. Because the hearts of the knowers of God, they are protected and preserved from the misleading thoughts and the dark whispers of the nafs, um, and essentially they're mahfuz from these other distractions and things that would lead a person astray. And that's for the knowers of God who are focused in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the allegorical commentary for Surah Al-Buruj. Inshallah, now we're going to go to Surah at-Tariq, and we'll hopefully get through the first 10 verses if I use time well. So, alhamdulillah, we have Sobia in the class who's going to help me do that. So I'll read the first 10 verses. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر. By the heaven and the nightly star. And what will make you realize what the nightly star is? It is the star of piercing brightness. There is no soul without a vigilant angel recording everything. Let people then consider what they were created from. They were created from a gushing fluid. I have a different translation here, stemming from between, I think I'm going to use the backbone and the rib cage. My translation here mentions issuing from between the loins and the pelvic arch. Truly, he is able to bring him back on the day when secrets are tested, whereat man has neither strength nor helper. So for these verses and for the surah in general, Surah at-Tariq is an early Meccan surah. It was most likely revealed after Surah al-Balad. That's the 90th surah. And it takes its title from the mention of the first verse, at-Tariq. The word taraqa means to pound. And so at-Tariq is thus understood by some to indicate the way, like tariq, very similar to tariq. Only tariq is the form of the verb fa'il and tariq is fa'il, right? So at-Tariq is thus understood by some to indicate the way because the path is pounded by the feet that walk upon it. And also, since doors are closed at night, when people arrive at this time, they have to pound on the doors in order to gain entry. So at-Tariq is also understood to mean that which comes by night, right? The knock on the door that comes at nighttime, or the night visitor. So if you've ever seen some of the Qur'an translations refer to at-Tariq as the night visitor. However, the at-Tariq is most popularly understood as the morning star. And so the surah begins with an oath by heaven and the celestial bodies. And then it calls human beings to reflect upon the soul and the humble origins of our physical nature and the fact that we are all returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The oath is then echoed, and then it leads into a final warning. The Prophet Muhammad would often recite this surah and Surah Al-Buruj as part of the 2 afternoon prayers. So he would recite these 2 surahs in Dhuhr and Asr. So the first verse, let me go back to it. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ, by the heavens or the skies. Here the translation is by the sky and that which comes by night. And that which comes by night can refer either to a specific star or all heavenly bodies that appear at night, but then they disappear during the day. And Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions that in this first verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aggrandizes the value of the sky. And he says the sky is the place that from it comes the rizq of mankind. And from it is it's also the place or the mesken of the angels. And And uh, the when it comes to the word وبالطارق, he says it's a جنس النجوم. So it's like the refers to the losing my Arabic translation. What is jins? From the nature, what was that? From like the species, or like species doesn't apply to stars, but like from the kind from like stars. Um, but this is answered really in the third verse because it says وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقُ. So now there's the question, what will make you know what this tariq is? What will apprise thee of that which comes by night? And so this question comes after Imam Ibn Ajiba. He mentions that this aggrandizes the sky and what's in the sky even more. So there's a magnitude to what we're being, that Allah is swearing by it, and He's drawing our attention to it again. And then the answer comes, النجم الثاقب. It is the piercing star. And most say the piercing star refers to the Pleiades. And the Pleiades are considered to be the furthest most. That's why sometimes it's translated as the morning star. The highest or furthest star. Others say that it refers to Saturn, Venus, or a meteor. And a minority say that it could be any star that glitters. And that's in the Tafsir of Imam al-Alusi. Each interpretation mentions the star is called upon because it pierces the dark with light. And in this sense, it can be seen as an allusion to overcoming ignorance. Now, what's amazing about this is Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that النجم الثاقب is the star that is piercing with its because of its light, and it pierces the dark. It's because of how dark it is that its light is made so clear. Like if it was bright outside, you can't see how bright it is, but it's shining ever more brightly simply because of how dark the night is. And so this is for me, this, I mean, when I read this, the first thing that came to mind was, subhanAllah, sometimes like there are things we take for granted, and especially like spiritually, faith, iman itself, something that is taken for granted. But then like in the darkest times, it seems to glow most brightly. Like its beauty shines in a way that's unmistakable. Like it was there all along, but it's in like pain and difficult times and dark times when it's the most like amazing, right? And I really, subhanAllah, so many of the ayat of the Quran makes, when you look at what's continuously still happening, I think, in Gaza and what the people in Gaza have gone through, and just that in such a dark, and we can't imagine like such darkness, right? In terms of we get the images, and even the images you can't look at because they're unbearable. But the light of their faith is so much more bright because of how dark the darkness is around them. Like it just shines so clearly. Um, and so the beauty of faith often shines most brightly and most piercingly and most like because when something is so bright, the contrast, it pops. Right? It pops in the space that it's in. Um, and so this is subhanAllah something that I think we can also especially because it says this is like an allusion to overcoming ignorance. One of the blessings of the hardest times and the darkest times and you know, I don't want to use the word impossible, but the times that feel the most impossible is how incredibly bright the light of faith somehow still breaks through it all, right? Like that's something that, subhanAllah, like story after story, in the Quran and in the lives of people that, in the present and in the past, you just see how like it looks like a darkness, and this thing that breaks right through it is the light of faith. And that's really, subhanAllah, something beautiful, something really, truly, truly amazing. So it's called a najm thaqib, right? The piercing star. And after that, what is the next verse? Because it's related. إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ. There is no soul. Wait, I have to go back. I have to go back. The Pleiades, back to the Pleiades. Now, there's a beautiful story about the companion of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Salman al-Farsi. And I wanted to read a place where this was brought up because when I was reading about how this is one of the opinions, then I was like, wait, I've read about the Pleiades before in Hadith, and so I wanna see how it can reflect on this verse. So very interestingly, this is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He said, while we were sitting with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu Surah al-Jum'ah was revealed to him. And when the verse came, and he, Allah, has sent him Muhammad also to other Muslims. Okay, that's the third verse. Sorry, my phone is not letting me see it. Okay. And then they said, I think here, وَآخَرُونَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ. And there's others that are coming that they have not yet like joined them. This was recited by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Abu Hurairah said, I said, who are they, O Allah's Messenger? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not reply until I repeated my question 3 times. At that time, Salman al-Farsi was with us. So Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam put his hand on Salman, saying, if faith were at the place of the Pleiades, and in Arabic it's the word is Thuraya, that's like the highest star. Even then, some men or a man from his people would attain it. So the people from Salman al-Farsi's people, which means like the Persians, if Iman was in the Pleiades, the highest star, these people would essentially, because of their himma, they would their high spiritual aspiration, like men or people from Salman al-Farsi's people would go out and seek it. So if you think about there's a particular phase in Islamic history where the center of Islamic learning actually shifted after the time of Imam Malik from Mecca and Medina to actually the Persians. And Imam Ghazali and Rumi and Shaykh Abdul Qadir actually is in Iran, and actually he's in Iraq, but he comes from Persian lands to Iraq. And so there's Imam al-Qushayri, like all of them, if you go back and you look at Abu Yazid al-Bastami, like you could just name and continue to name and continue. And it's a whole era where, oh, like I don't even know if it's a generation or if I can say generations came from this region. And what's also very interesting is they were scholars, but he says if faith were if Iman was out there, these people would would seek it even if it was all the way over there, right? All the names I just mentioned, they're all people who are giants from Ahl Tasawwuf. Like they were the people who sought embodied spirituality and like not just like the outward knowledge, but like the actual embodiment of the faith itself. And then it shifted. We took a class with Shaykh Muslema, and he was like, after the Mongol invasion, it actually went back into Sham and those areas, and that became the center. But it moves around. It's really interesting how the center of Islam at different times in Islamic history, it like moves around the Muslim world. It's like spreading um, uh, amazing historical figures, and these people, and wherever it moves, they end up not just contributing to like the understanding and knowledge and practice for their people, but they end up being those who contribute to the whole ummah that we still benefit from. So, anywho, I thought that was interesting because with the opinion of the Pleiades, of Thuraya, then it would be like the highest or furthermost star, and this idea that the Prophet Muhammad praising a people who would, if that's where Iman was, they would travel there to get it. It's also something to reflect on. So about the fourth verse, in kullu nafsin lamma alayha hafid, there are a number of different opinions. And I'm going to start actually for this one with Imam Ibn Ajibas. So Imam Ibn Ajibah has 3 positions. He says it can either be that there is no soul without this translation chooses an opinion, just so you know. Sometimes translations, they kind of interact with tafsir. So this translation has chosen the opinion that it's referring to angels, the second position, which is the angels that record all of our deeds, right? Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions, because but it doesn't say the word angel in the verse. It says the actual translation for the literal translation of the fourth verse is over every soul there is a guardian. Over every soul there is a guardian. So who is this guardian? Singular. And Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that one opinion is that this guardian is actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is the one who is Ar-Raqib. He is watching over us at all times. And he is, from his beautiful names, Al-Muhaymin. He's the one who's protecting the Iman in his servants. And he mentions the verse, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ رَقِيبًا. Like and Allah is over all things watchful. Muraqaba is to watch ourselves, right? So he is Ar-Raqib. He's watchful and protective and guarding us at all times. So that's one opinion. The second opinion is the one that this translation has chosen, which is that it's man yahfaz amalaha. So and the one who um, accounts for all of what the deeds of human beings, their good deeds and their bad deeds. And then for the evidence for this is he uses the verse from Surah Al-Infitar, وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحَافِظِينَ, right? So that would be angels in the plural form. And the third opinion, which is also really interesting, is not the angels that are writing everything, but actually guardian angels, different angels, not recording angels, but literally protecting angels. And he says, and these are the angels that protect us from slips and are guarding over us. And he quotes the verse from Surah Ar-Ra'd, verse 11. For each one, there is successive angels before and behind, protecting them by Allah's command. Okay, and lahu. So here it's like singular. Lahu is for each one. معقبات من بين يديه ومن خلفه يحفظونه من أمر الله. And there's a narration that's mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi and Imam al-Zamakhshari. It's a very interesting narration. Because Abu Umama said that the Prophet Muhammad said, because remember, this says successive, right? Successive, for each one, there is successive angels, like a lot, for one person, okay? So the Prophet Muhammad said 160 angels have been appointed over the believer to protect him from that which has not been decreed for him, including his eyes, which are protected by 7 angels, as a vessel of honey is protected from flies. If a person were left to his own devices for even an instant, the devils would cause him a great deal of harm. So if you think about a vessel of honey, right, like a jar of honey, flies can be all around it, can be on the jar, but they're not touching the honey. They just can't get to it, right? And so there's a barrier between our physical world and this unseen world of other entities. And 160, for every believer, there's 160 angels protecting us, like that glass protects, if the vessel is made of glass, like the glass is protecting. And he says just for the eyes, there's 7 angels for our eyes. And this narration again is mentioned in with a slightly different wording in Tabarani. Also, it's mentioned in 2 tafsirs. So, but the verse itself is also there. For each one, there is successive angels before and behind them, protecting them by Allah's command. So, subhanAllah, that like we're protected. Whether you take the first opinion, but that's the most protection, which is that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's our guardian. Or you take the second one, and that they're recording our deeds, and they're preserved in a preserved record. Or you take the third one, which is, indicating how much protection we have from the angels. That's a great deal of protection, alhamdulillah, that the believers especially. It says, وَكُلُّ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ, right? So that's in the language of the hadith is specifically for the believers. SubhanAllah, how iman, faith in Allah can, you know, unlock something that is so important. I think I'm doing okay on time, right? فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق. Let people then consider what they were created from. In here, Imam Ibn Ajiba makes a point. Well, I want to go first actually with what Imam al-Tabari says. He says, let those who deny the resurrection reflect upon the manner in which God created them. Like, who are we to deny anything? Like, we don't remember the first moment of our existence. Like, we don't remember it. We don't even remember it. Like, forget being in charge of it. We don't even remember ourselves coming into existence. And also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. In this regard, Al-Maybudi, he writes that God created a face that is fit for prostration, eyes that are fit for taking heed, a body that is fit for service, a heart that is fit for knowledge. And here the word that's used is arfan. So it's not ilm. Ilm is usually referred to outward knowledge, but arfan is like spiritual knowing of God. And then he says, in a secret core fit for love. So remember God's blessing upon you, for he adorned your tongues with the shahada, your hearts with arfan and joy, and your bodies with service and worship. Right? So this is like to think about what we were created from helps you to accept what you're created for. When you come from nothing, right? Like, how can you assume that, like, you created yourself? How can you assume that you're in charge of everything? Like, we weren't even in charge of ourselves. But what we can do is find the purpose of our creation and then try to fulfill it. خلق من ماء دافق. They were created from a gushing fluid. يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب, stemming from between the backbone and the rib cage. Imam Ibn Rajib also makes the point that the one who started us all out as nothing but fluid, and then we come into existence into this world as full human beings, doing and acting and doing everything. He's the same one that can, after we die, bring us back. And he says, if a person can accept, and the interesting thing about the Quraysh is that they didn't have a problem accepting that God created them. They had a problem accepting that God will bring them back to life. And so the importance of, looking at what we came from is that didn't he who made us from this, right, created us from this first as dust, then as fluid, then we become full human beings, the one who, this is a transformation that a portion of it is seen in the world. Isn't he not capable of taking, dead bones and turning that back into a full human being? And so he also says the one who can accept that we have angels that are writing and recording, or that the one who can accept that we have angels that are protecting, how can they not accept that there is one who originated them in the first place, and that one who originated them can return them back? And if they can accept that, then let them prepare for the day of consequences, and let them prepare for and let them focus in this life for what's actually going to benefit them on that day. Here, loins or sulb and pelvic arch, tara'ib, are understood by some to be the respective parts of male and female that then form the fetus. And now comes the point that's being made through our reflection of where we came from. إِنَّهُ عَلَى رَجْعِهِ لَقَادِرٌ. Surely he is fully capable of bringing them back to life. And in Surah at-Fatir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that God is able to create human beings from dust, then from a drop. And he can surely resurrect us, Surah Al-Rum, He it is who originates creation, then brings it back, and that is most easy for him. Again, many of the pre-Islamic Arabs could accept that God was the creator, but they could not accept that he could resurrect the dead. And so there's a broken logic in someone who can accept God as a creator. If he's the creator, how can he, like the all-powerful one who created everything, like he has the power to create, how can he not have the power to recreate? Like he's not even doing something different, right? So there's this broken logic here that is being questioned. And it made me think about, do we sometimes have a broken logic about God? Like, do we have equations ourselves? For example, which promise of God do people have a hard time believing? Like Allah makes many promises to us in the Quran. Um, do we have a hard time believing that he can answer our du'as? When we make the du'a, do we feel like he's not going to answer our du'a? Do we feel somehow the equations of this world are stronger than the power of God? Maybe a person's applying for a job, applying for a position, applying for anything, and they think, no, it's impossible. Right? Go back to that word possible from impossible. So here it says, إِنَّهُ عَلَى رَجْعِهِ لَقَادِرٌ, right? But is there something that we also don't, like subconsciously, consciously we would all say God is capable of doing all things, but at a subconscious level, is there something that we believe that God is not capable of doing for us? Or do we believe that he is capable, but he's just not going to do this for us because there's something inherently wrong with us, that he's not going to do it? Like there's all kinds of different ways that we can hold a particular opinion about God, and it defies what we know about God, right? And so if we experience that feeling in our heart, and again, the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he said that Allah answers the dua of the believer so long as the believer does not say, Allah is not answering my duas. So that's like, so what do? You're making a dua for something, and that specific thing you're making dua for is not manifesting. I don't want to use that word. It's not happening. So what does a person feel? What is the natural sort of thought? Some people stop making dua for it because they say, oh, I made dua for it, it didn't happen, so I'm not going to make dua for it anymore. Any other? They want the answer quickly. Okay. Yeah. I'm I don't know. They lose hope. Yeah. Yes. Mhm. 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 So yeah, so there's so I mean impossible and possible, I want to leave that to the theology class with Sheikh Fuad because we're not actually supposed to make dot for things that are like mathematically or whatever, like they actually don't make sense. Like I'm not going to make dua that what is it called, that there's a time machine that I can go travel back in time and do something. You know what I mean? Like there's weird, when you talk to children, they always like, can I make there's stuff like this that comes up. Yeah. You can be cured. Yes, yes. Yeah. There's even stories of very, I mean, there are karamat of very elderly people having children, and that like delivering and all of that. So I want to even put that one on the side for now. I want to look at the person who's doing the supplication, and um, when they're making a supplication for something that's not happening, how should they, what is like, I want to say, what is the state of the heart of the one who trusts the promise of God? Uh, Just check. Dua is a process that changes the entire person. Your heart and mind evolve and teaches one sabr and mercy for ourselves and others. Alhamdulillah. Yes, dua is a practice. Going back to, I'm making dua and I'm feeling a loss of hope while I'm making dua. Yeah. You're saying sometimes the dua is answered and you just don't want to accept it. Oh, okay. Because it wasn't the answer that you wanted. Okay. Hmm. Yes, that I mean that you're doing your full like because dua is part of like the tawakkul, but you also take asbab. So you're doing what you need to be doing with your hands, but you're interacting with the results as Allah's answer in some ways. Like you are witnessing God, you're not witnessing yourself. Okay, so I'm gonna stop making you guys guess. I'm so sorry for doing this. I do too many Sunday programs with the kids. So what was that? Yes, yes. Like usually would there be gratitude? Because you know that I'm asking for this and you're not giving me. Thank God because you know what that that's a very high station and that's a good place. Like when we're not in that place we want to find our way to that place, right? Which for those who are listening online, he said um to actually make the dua with gratitude, um so that such that if a person sees that what they're asking for is not like answered according to what they say, then they know that Allah is giving them better than what they're asking for, and so they're just grateful. And that's actually the response of Ali radiallahu anhu. He would say that the only time I'm happier, subhanAllah, the only time I'm happier um, from getting my du'as answered is when my du'as are not answered. Because that means like Allah is giving me something better. That's like a true belief that Allah is certainly giving me something better, but in a very like practical way. Not practical, I want to say tangible. And forgive me because I really shouldn't be doing children's programs and adult programs at the same time because there's a lot of overlap sometimes. But it's kind of like, let's say you're applying for a college. You're trying to get into a specific college, right? Which is, I don't know, think of one. UCSD. Don't go there. Trying to get into UCSD. And um, you've applied, you've done your very best. As you're waiting for the results, right? Is it wrong in your heart to feel, inshallah, I'm going to get into UCSD? Is that wrong to feel? No. You're actually having the opinion of God that like I've done what, whatever, like in terms of that, taking the asbab, and I've done the application, and inshallah, this application is going to be accepted. And even out of all these students, inshallah, it's going to work. And you're making this with there's something else that's in your heart at the same time. Okay. There's another thing that's in your heart at the same time that you're saying, inshallah, I'm going to go to UCSD. I'm going to get accepted. It's just as happy, which is, and if I don't, for whatever reason, if Allah chooses that I don't get into UCSD, inshallah, I'm certainly getting into something better. Whatever it is that's the next thing. It's certainly so you're happy regardless. It's either going to be UCSD or it's going to be better than UCSD. But I'm confident, like my Lord is going to give me something good, and so I'm not desperate for UCSD, but I am hopeful for it. But in the sense that this is what my dua is, this is what my effort is, but I'm not desperate. Desperate would be like I didn't get into UCSD, and this is normal for kids. I mean, I was in high school. I remember when the letters were coming in, and people had certain schools that they're trying to get into, and like the crushing devastation when it doesn't happen, like like the weeks of recovery when it doesn't happen, just to get back to like, and again that's a normal thing that people go through, but like iman is such that the person can feel positive towards this endeavor specifically and also feel confident at the same time. If it's not this, it will certainly be better than this, so I'm not gonna feel anxious, right? Rather, I'm gonna feel grateful. And that's when we find ourselves in the anxious state, it's like they're like a radar. Mayday, mayday. Don't, that's how to, it doesn't mean there's no sin in feeling anxious. But can I move this back to I believe my Lord is generous. I believe my Lord's going to be good to me, and He's always been good to me, and He's the best. So He's going to be the best to me, and like kind of reaffirming our good opinion of Allah. That there is no promise that I believe in that contradicts like something else, right? If Allah is the one who created us in the beginning, yes, of course He can create us again a second time in terms of life after death. If Allah is the one who's been generous to me with my whole life, of course He's able and He is because He is Allah going to be generous with me, um, you know, always. It's one of His names. It's one of His beautiful names. So kind of like, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think grieving and loss is very different than still like an anxiousness over like results of something. Yeah, he has husn dhan, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, when someone passes away, when someone passes away, the Prophet Muhammad, when his child passed away and he's crying, that's not a sign of lack of contentment with Allah or the decree or any sign of a bad opinion or anything like that, right? So I think that grieving people is very different than kind of like the example I gave was more of like a worldly one, like a specific college, like a material sort of advancement. It's not the same as other human souls. Yeah, like a deep loss. Yeah. A loss I think is a whole other category. But yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. In reality, what was that? Mhm. Yes. I mean, it is a test. It's a test. And I think, so I want to, on one hand, I want to validate and say that it's very normal to not like when you don't get what you want. It's like, it's part of the way that Allah tests us in this life. And it's okay to feel that. And actually, it's good to acknowledge that you're feeling that because you can suppress it and it's going to just like, bother you. So don't be in denial of when that's there. Like really be like, okay, that's where I'm at and I feel it and it's okay because that's what I'm going through right now. Alhamdulillah. But you might feel in that state is I don't want to feel this way. Like it's okay that I feel this way, but I want to feel differently about this because like my intellect tells me that how I'm feeling um is like again it's where I'm at, but it's not maybe where I want to be and where I want to grow and how I want to grow. So how do I climb how do from where I'm at to a place that my intellect tells me this is how I want to be. So I want to say it is a test. It's definitely a test. And it like all things we talked about, there's also it's a practice, right? There's a practice. So many times a person may go through this may happen in your life in a number of different ways, and you may feel like, oh, I'm so unattached. And the delusion that comes in, right? Because this thing didn't happen and this thing didn't happen, and I was fine. So alhamdulillah, I'm not. And then one thing happens and you find like you're having that same human response, right? And you're like, gosh, I'm really here, huh? That's where I'm at right now. Like, it's very humbling. It's good to go through it. I'm telling you as someone who's unfortunately there, go through it all the time. Um, but that's like, it defies the truth. it defies the intellect, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, um, the one who has made all these promises to us, and nothing is impossible for him. And like all the good opinions, that's actually the truth. So let me get from where I'm at right now to the truth, such that like what my mind has accepted, um, and my heart has accepted, like I can somehow more fully accept. Um, may Allah help us. May Allah help us to do that in whatever ways we can as a regular practice. And by the way, anytime we read about the beautiful names of Allah and study the beautiful names of Allah, it really helps. It really, really helps because it's like in knowing Allah, then being reminded of who He is and being reminded of His beautiful names, a lot of these thoughts kind of like go to their proper places. Okay, we are going to go, we only have two verses. Inshallah, we're going to close. Um, so, verse number 9. يوم تبلى السرائر, on the day all secrets will be disclosed. So here, the secrets refers to all that is hidden in the heart and mind and to all of one's deeds. On the day of judgment, people's mouths and feet and hands and even their skin will bear witness to what they have done. And it's mentioned, there's a narration here that's mentioned in one of the tafsir that Mu'adh bin Jabal once asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, what are these secrets for which the servants, the human beings, will be tested in the hereafter? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu replied, your secrets are your deeds, such as prayer, fasting, zakat, and the minor ablution and the major ablution, and all other obligatory acts. All deeds are hidden secrets. That's really interesting because a lot of deeds are public, but how is it a hidden secret? For if a person wills, he says, I have prayed, though he has not prayed. And if he wills, he says, I have made my ablution, though he has not made his ablution. And this is God's word on the day when the secrets are tested. And Imam Ibn Ajiba in this regard, يوم تبلى السرائر, he says that it is a reference to actually it's the day when our beliefs and our creeds, when are sort of sorted out, the strength of our belief is sorted out, our intentions, our hidden actions, and what was apparent in them. So whether they were good intentions or bad intentions, the things that we did and people didn't see whether they were good or bad, all of those things are tested on the day of judgment. And the 10th verse, فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ وَلَا نَاصِرٍ, then no one will have neither power nor any helper. And here what's being referred to is no one will have power against the will of God. No one has a helper against the will of God. So these things are going to be brought out and made evident, and the tests will happen no matter how much people don't want that reality to be known. And this verse echoes others in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is spoken of as the sole helper or protector, and that none will be able to help each other against the will of God. Now, this is a warning for the people who were rejecting the concept of resurrection. And this is a warning for the fact that all of our deeds are going to be seen, and the secrets of our deeds are going to be seen, not just the deed itself, but like what was in them. And so the assignment for this week was twofold. Okay. So the first one is to think about, it's kind of connected to the allegorical commentary also, but again, it repeated from Surah al-Buruj and also now in Surah at-Tariq. It's like the deeds of the heart. And so one of the deeds of the heart that I want us to, and we're going to be doing this anyways, but so I'm just formalizing it as an assignment within this class, which is to have intention, one intention, as you read Qur'an and as you have however much of Qur'an you plan to read in the month of Ramadan, is make the intention, and I saw this recently from Shaykh Yasser Fahmi. He said it was very transformative for him the first time he read the Quran with the intention of, I'm reading the Quran to try to know Allah better. So like you're literally this Ramadan, it's not about how many khatams I'm gonna have or You can have a lot of khatams. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying simply saying add to the intention. Like make very clearly the intention. Oh Allah, I'm reading this Quran so I can know you better. And see how that, inshallah, has an impact. Because the only shift, it's the same outward deed. The only shift is a different intention of the heart. So try to establish that intention very deeply. And then the second sort of like, could say like deed of the heart that I'm going to assign is something that's your choice. I don't want to know what it is, but it's an intention for a deed of the heart, a hidden deed of the heart for the month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan. And I don't know, I don't want to know what it is, inshallah, but I want us to all pick one. And you can make more than one, but as to formalize within this assignment is pick one, inshallah, that we can do for this, practice together. And I will be seeing you guys in 2 weeks because unfortunately, again, I'm traveling. I have the Bayan intensive week. But the good news is if when I come back, we will finish, inshallah, the rest of Surah at-Tariq before Ramadan starts. So the last verses will be in 2 weeks. And so we will close. I'm so lost, alhamdulillah, today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Oh God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven. Not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Also, just a reminder, we have a special 15th of Sha'ban program, night of the 15th, on here on Thursday, special Believing Together that will be here this coming Thursday. It'll be a special Believing Together. I think they usually start at 7, if I'm not mistaken, but yes, inshallah. Yeah, that's the yes. Oh, sure.
Request to repeat 2 parts that you mentioned.
Yes.
One about Hadith al-Jum.
Yes. In the allegorical commentary, he says the junud are the junud of your nafs. These are the bad forces, because in the ayah it's referring to the forces of Fir'aun and Thamud, and he says Fir'aun represents the soldiers of your lowest desires, and Thamud represents the soldiers of attachments to the material world.
How and what for we were created.
Mm-hmm.
We have a for that able to. Can you mention
a piece again? Yeah. So this is from Al-Maybudi. Maybudi writes that God created a face that is fit for prostration, eyes fit for taking heed, a body that is fit for service, a heart fit for irfan, like spiritual knowledge, a secret core fit for love. And so here, secret core, I'm imagining, refers to the ruh, because the ruh is where the asrar of the spirit is. So remember God's blessing upon you, for He adorned your tongues with the shahada, your hearts with irfan and spiritual knowledge and joy, and your bodies with service and worship. Mhm. Love. Mhm. And the tongues are the shahada. Yeah. Yes. Wayakum. Wayakum. Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. Inshallah, see you in 2 weeks again. I'm so sorry for these travel breaks, but maybe distance makes the hearts grow fonder.